Okay, so we're going to look back at the week's events, and it was just like really mind-blowing this past week. So we're going to look from last Sunday to this past Sunday, that's yesterday. And last Sunday, we were still talking about the death toll rising from the dam, the Kakhovka Dam that was blown apparently. And then Ukraine was taking a village in Zaporizhia, and the counteroffensive is on. Ukrainian forces took control of Platsky, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And the British were saying that both sides were taking heavy losses. And it's understandable that the Ukrainians would be taking higher losses than what they've been getting before because the attackers generally do worse as far as casualties than the defenders. That's not always the case, but it's certainly not a 10-to-1 ratio like RT was talking about. Okay, and even Prigozhin came out later in the week and said they're lying to you by an order of like 10 times. They have 10 times as many casualties as what they're saying. Okay, on Monday, we talked about, we saw headlines that said 8 villages were liberated, but there also were other headlines that there were heavy casualties. Russia rejected a UN aid. So there was UN aid proposal for those on the Russian side who were affected by the Kakhovka Dam. The UN wanted to help. Russia rejected that aid. What a jerk move. The Kakhovka Dam, it appears to have been, according to one report, explosive-laden car was seen by satellite at the dam. We don't know if that went into the dam or if it was just there or what exactly, but there was this report that came out about that. Also on Monday, Navalny, who I did a video about Navalny about 3 weeks ago. He's a Russian dissident who's in prison, and he was urging his supporters to protest Russia's involvement in Ukraine. Now, Navalny has support, and so like when he wanted to call people to all vote for one candidate over another, people would do that. So it's good that he's calling on that. I know he has baggage. I understand that, but that's a good thing for him to be against Russia and in that way supporting Ukraine. Ukrainian farmers were improvising tractors to clear lands of mines. I'm perpetually amazed at how creative and innovative Ukrainians are and how just they're already wound up and ready to go. You don't have to motivate them to do things. Okay, Tuesday, 20th of June, Trump was claiming that he told Putin, don't do it. Now, this is how Republicans tend to see how Trump would have acted if Putin had tried to invade Ukraine during his time. And it's not because Trump thinks that Ukraine shouldn't be invaded so much as that Trump couldn't stand the idea, his ego seeming to look like he was being shown up by Putin somewhere in the world. Like if he tells, he wouldn't be able to stand for that kind of thing. That's how Republicans think, rightly or wrongly. But again, he's saying this in past tense. It's counterfactual. You can't actually tell what would have happened, but he was claiming that. Okay, Russians launch another massive air attack. They've been doing this for a long time. It's really nothing unusual at this point. The Bulgarian defense minister was leaning toward arming Ukraine, and this was kind of a shift for Bulgaria, so that's a good thing. Shogu. I talked about this earlier in the week. Shogu was saying that the US and the UK will be dragged into a full war if Ukraine bombs Crimea with long-range weapons. Now, you can't unilaterally just do that and say, well, if they do this, then you're involved. But it's trying to deter. That's all that is. And the Pentagon had another accounting error, which provides another $6.2 billion in aid to Ukraine. And some sources were saying they were doing that intentionally. I don't know. The government's just not all that competent for many things, so it could be either. I just don't know. Okay, Wednesday, the 21st of July, there was more success in the counteroffensive, but it's small, it's marginal, it's partial, it's only taking a few kilometers at a time. It's not this massive thing with Kharkiv that we saw last year. Russia's moving to legalize prisoners to be recruited for war. And so they're taking a page out of what Prigozhin did with Wagner, and they were trying to legalize that like across Russia. And that's a telling sign, if you ask me. Okay, so the EU is providing its 11th sanctions package, and why we're on 11 and we didn't just do most of these earlier on, I just don't understand. Zelensky says that there's slow progress, but this is not a movie, and he's right. It's not a movie. It's something that he has to be very cautious about how he's spending human life. And that was carried in RT saying, see, Zelensky's admitting that he can't make any progress, and that's not what he was saying. Former Green Beret in one article was saying that this is the most righteous war of his generation. And I think a lot of us feel that. A lot of us have tuned into this going, you know what? This is really important. We need to care and pay attention to this, and there's a reason for that. Dennis Schmihel said that Russia must pay for the war, and that's being echoed again and again. The EU Commission is making moves to make Russia pay for the war, and that's the exact right thing to be doing. NATO allies are increasingly starting to back fast-track approval for NATO membership, and I don't think it'll happen until the war is concluded, but as soon as the war is concluded, I think it'll happen very quickly. They'll be, in place. All the pieces will be in place for it as soon as that's over. And then finally, on Wednesday, RFK Jr. was blaming the U.S. for the war. RFK Jr., if you don't know who he is, he's a Democrat candidate for President of the United States. He's the son of Robert F. Kennedy, who was the Attorney General of the United States for John F. Kennedy, his uncle. And he's blaming the U.S. for the war and saying that Russia was acting in good faith. And he's acting in good faith because remember they had this agreement that well, we talked about this when the Africans went to Moscow and Putin was holding up this document and saying, see, they signed this. Well, they were trying to work toward an agreement. And then remember the poisoning? So, okay. Thursday, 22nd of June, 2023, RT was saying that the counteroffensive was not meeting Western expectations. And Zelensky had just talked about that. And so that's how they were spinning it. RT was also saying that the Russian army was getting enough recruits for a regiment every day, 1,336 people, which probably should be about 2,000 people for a regiment, but nonetheless, Shoigu was claiming that. Now, if Shoigu is claiming that, there's a reason he's claiming that, and that's really interesting that they're saying that we're adding more people and more people every day. It's kind of a strange thing that he would be making hay of that. The Kahova Dam canals are drying up, and that's kind of good in the sense that it will allow forces to move across. Kind of bad in a whole different way. Russia accuses Ukraine of using UK missiles to blow a hole in the Konhar Bridge. Now, this is a bridge connecting Crimea to the rest of Ukraine. And to do this limits the options of the Russian military for moving things in and out of Crimea. So that's something to keep your eye on. Kazakh, and other Stan companies are sending Western tech to Russia's war machine. And this is bad. This is dual-use computer chips and things along those lines. There's like a 36-time increase of the imports of these tech pieces. And it appears that they're going into the country and then going back out to Russia. So they're buying up all these chips and then sending them for war use, it appears. And then finally, the Ukrainian Air Force destroyed a helicopter and an ammo depot. And keep your eye on the ammo depots that are destroyed, because that apparently, from what I understand, is a sign that something more is going to happen when you start to see that kind of thing. Okay, Friday, there was a UN report. Russia used 91 children as human shields, so shame on them. That's despicable. Ukraine says that it has yet to commit its offensive reserves in battle, and I've seen that in multiple places. So they're just testing and prodding to see where they can get, and then they'll commit once they can get through. Russia is using spy dolphins, according to the UK Ministry of Defense. I don't know how spy dolphins work exactly, but that sounds kind of cool that spy dolphins even exist. But this is according to the UK, so they do a good job reporting on these things. Germany says that Russia also must pay for Ukraine. They're joining the chorus in saying that, and that's a good thing. Now, Friday is when everything turned weird, where Prigozhin accuses Moscow about lying about Ukraine and other things, and Sergei Shoigu must be punished, and there's this 10-to-1 ratio, and the Russian military leadership was lying to Putin, and they're lying to you about casualties, and then he vows to punish the top Ministry of Defense brass, and then he starts what is known as a coup or an insurrection or a rebellion or something. Saturday, here we are, the mutiny. it's also called a mutiny, is a challenge to Putin. And there are multiple headlines here on the same day, but it's all about this. The challenge to Putin exposed weakness. It really did. Prigozhin invades Russia and enters Rostov, and then he seized a military installation and just kept it running and doing what it was supposed to be doing, but he was in charge, clearly. Prigozhin withdrew from Russia after both Sergevin, well, of course, Shogu and Gerasimov were already condemning it. The anti-terrorist arm was condemning it. FSB was condemning it. But when Sergevin, who is an ally of Prigozhin, condemned it, that was a big change. And then when Putin came out and full-throated called it treason, I think that was a tipping point if Prigozhin had any hope. Why he did it or what he did exactly or what was behind it or the motive, it's still unclear. There's a timeline to it, but it just doesn't make sense. In my last video, I talked about how it's like a Rubik's Cube. I can't really make sense of, because not everything fits. Wagner agrees to end the insurrection. They're being pardoned. Prigozhin's being pardoned as long as he goes to Belarus and stays out of Russia. And that's just weird. But it exposed Putin. And I think China was taking notice and paying attention and going, oh, that's not what we thought was going to be able to be happening there. So it was really interesting. Wagner agrees to end the insurrection. Kremlin reveals the death of Wagner deal. So Wagner apparently will be joining the military, and Prigozhin is exiled to Belarus, and charges against Wagner are dropped. But that's what we know. Okay, Sunday, it's more of the same. Prigozhin says he's standing down. He demonstrated the ability to generate public support, and that's really, really interesting and dangerous to Putin. I don't think he was trying to undermine Putin. I think he was trying to build himself in stature to Putin, but Putin then decided that he's going to back these guys instead of these guys, and everything changed for him in a minute. The dictator president of Venezuela, Maduro, said that Putin is victorious after the insurrection, but it's really a bad look for Putin. The Putin-Prigozhin feud is not over, I don't think. I think Prigozhin will resurface or somehow mysteriously die. One of these things will happen. I don't know which. In Ukraine, people were jubilant about this, and they were too quick because they were reading in what they wanted to see rather than what was actually going on. And when that happens, you have to slow down and just go, what's really happening here? And then ask yourself, what would come after this mutiny? Okay, so that's all that I have right now. That is quite a week, and it's just like really mind-blowing. But I'll keep you posted. I'll be back this time next week. Thank you for your time. Thank you for caring about Ukraine.